This little unwieldy plant is called Bryophyllum delagoense, or also Kalanchoe delagoense. It's actually going back and forth between those two genera, so I'm not exactly certain as to what genus this is considered now, but those two genera are actually very similar to one another. Now, this one is a survivor. I actually ended up taking cuttings of this plant from a storefront that actually closed down, and this was in the window for so many months. And I finally talked to a construction worker who I had seen there and actually asked him if I could actually take this plant. So this was actually a huge plant that I ended up taking about maybe 15 cuttings of. And it's part of the reason why it has this kind of funky, weird growth structure. And what's great about this particular plant, which is known as mother of thousands or mother of millions, is that it produces its own little plantlets along the edges of these toothed leaves, which is kind of awesome because sometimes people have difficulty propagating plants, and this is a type of plant that like really propagates on the ready. And I'm actually quite sad that none of the plantlets are actually here now. I'm kind of looking at each one of these leaflets, but this was definitely burdened with a lot of plantlets recently, and I found different Bryophyllum or Kalanchoe delagoense like growing up in all my different pots, and I've seen a number of these small ones actually growing up here, so they will propagate kind of anywhere that they have a very good substrate, which could be a good thing for you, or it could be something that could be also quite annoying. However, I didn't want to see this plant suffer, even though I said that this is a survivor, because this could survive really neglectful, or I don't even know the right kind of word for it, just really harsh conditions. So I have this in a southwest facing window. The leaves can get a little bit damaged, maybe from too much light, but otherwise not so much. Southwest facing window, I'm watering it maybe once every couple weeks. This plant is used to surviving in really harsh terrains. This is common in Madagascar and does grow a little bit more like a weed. So if you're in an outdoor area and you want to plant this outside, I would say and recommend maybe not doing it just because of the way that it kind of spreads. But as a house plant, it's actually very giving, and it might give you a little bit too much. As far as fertilizing goes, you could fertilize this plant maybe on a monthly or even an annual basis, and going with a typical succulent fertilizer like a 247, a 277, or a 347, or even an organic fertilizer. Although I have to say, this plant doesn't need much in order to be able to grow in kind of a healthy manner. As far as pests go, I've actually never seen a pest on this particular plant. I'm sure mealybugs is something that I'd have to contend with if a mealybug ever got on here, but otherwise I think that it's an easy plant. I will say that these little things right here are little rootlets kind of growing out of the nodes. So that is another way that you could actually propagate this plant, and that is how I propagated mine from that one that I found in the storefront, is I just cut it off at the nodes at about a 45-degree angle. I let it sit out on my floor to dry out and callus over, because you don't want to stick this necessarily directly in soil because it could rot, or, you know, in some cases I think that this particular plant, because it's so good at propagating itself, it probably wouldn't rot, but I did let it dry out for about 24 to 48 hours, and then I stuck them right into this pot, and they propagated really, really easily, and I've had this plant ever since for probably about 2.5 years now. And I know it's been sitting in that storefront for at least 6 or 7. So this is a pretty old plant, and a really fun one to grow if you don't mind a ton of them growing.